Yeah, it was a question of who went first, and I don't
Okay.
care.
Hey, hi, Kristen. Well, I know I've been following you for a very long time in tech, ever since paper newsletters, but how long have you actually been doing this?
Oh, golly, more than 40 years. It's pretty scary. But I started really young. I was a machine shop tool salesperson when I was 17. It was an experiment. I was the first woman in the country. And they just gave me a catalog and said, here, go sell. And the mini skirt got me in the door, but then I couldn't answer customer questions. And so at that moment, with my tail between my legs and walking out back to my car, I decided I would learn everything I could about tech and selling. And I've been doing it ever since.
Cool.
So just getting here, I have a digital marketing company now and got about 30 people. And before that, I was a revenue coach for CEOs and entrepreneurs, mostly in the tech business, but also when the web came along in '94, I expanded out to different types of companies. So I've been doing this a long time.
Nice, nice.
So how about you, Frank? How did you get into all this?
Well, I've been in this almost as long as you have. I originally trained as an engineer. I worked in aerospace and entertainment for a number of years, building highly customized systems, all kinds of customized computers and hardware and software. But then as the cost of computing came down, I saw opportunities for this stuff to help businesses do things differently than they did before. I got into this business of building software for other people because it gave me a chance to just learn all different kinds of technologies, all different kinds of businesses, and apply them to different kinds of problems. So it's been a never boring occupation. Learning other people's businesses and learning how to help them with technology. And now we've been doing this. Actually, we just had our 30th anniversary. And we're at about, I guess we've got about 80 people here now between a couple of different companies. And it's a lot of fun.
Good. All right. So I want to talk about why we're here today. We're here today because business owners who are of the baby boomer age, and if I say baby boomer business owners, I can only say it once, not three times real fast, are in a pinch. And the pinch is that they have built a really good business, something solid that's working for their customers and they're good for their customers and all that, but they're having trouble with technology. And I know it's on your side with the applications, but it's also on my side with the marketing. And in fact, the applications and the marketing are one and the same often. I mean, as you are going to say later, probably, what is it? Your app is your business or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So what we as two people looking at this from different angles are trying to do is help baby boomer business owners get up to speed with technology. And the title of our little webinar here is a little harsh, Go Digital or Die. But the truth is, if you're not doing business digitally, your business will die. And there's a lot of businesses out there that are dying. And baby boomer business owners don't know what to do. So that's why we're here today, to help them manage that process better, understand it, understand what they're up against, give them some context so they can make better decisions. And you want to talk a second about digital transformation and applications?
Sure. Yeah, baby boomer business owners, I'll have to get used to saying that. The idea of going digital or die does sound sort of harsh, but it's something you've got to face because everyone's customers now are expecting some sort of digital relationship with your business. And probably 9 times out of 10 now, it starts with their phone, or it starts with their website or their web experience, but they just expect now, unless they're walking into an old hardware store because they just love the smell of an old hardware store, they expect a digital relationship. They don't look at it that way. Maybe you don't look at it that way, but that's what it is. It's a digital relationship with your customers. And if you don't have that, your customers will find people who do. I mean, I confess, I go into my neighborhood hardware store whenever I can because I love it, and I love the creak of the floors and the smell of the old screws and things. But when I have to actually get something done, I go to my Home Depot app, see what they have in the store. It tells me what aisle it's in and what bin, and I go and I get it and I'm done. If you can't relate to your customers in something approaching that level of seamless digital experience, you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. You're not competing doing business digitally. You're not competing with your competitors as much as you are competing with the expected customer experience.
Yes,
So they go to
exactly.
Amazon, who has been setting this setting the standard for us for a long time, and they expect one-click ordering. They expect reviews. They expect customers to answer questions. There's a lot of things in there that only Amazon is doing, but that's what they expect.
That's right. That's right. And it's not just consumers. My example was consumers, but business to business applications, they have the same expectation. I had a conversation with a banker, and we're talking to them about it's a boutique bank, not one of the big ones, and they're looking to sort of recreate themselves as an online digital 24/7 virtual bank. And in the discussion of whether mobile first really applies to their audience, or is that more of a generational thing, their answer was their customers, the people that they want to deal with, are never at their desks. They're always out talking to their customers. They're always out in court or whatever, because a lot of their customers are lawyers. They are also looking for their experience to be mobile first. And you don't get more digital than that.
Yeah, that's true. Mobile has really taken over, and Google, some time ago, I guess about a year and a half ago, split their ranking results and decisions into two camps, mobile and non-mobile, and started grading businesses differently depending on how mobile their business was. And if you're not showing up, it's a big
Right.
problem.
And that's hugely important to your side of the equation, which is how do your customers find you in the first place?
Yeah,
Our side of the equation is how do you keep them once they're there?
yeah,
In
exactly.
both cases, mobile plays a huge part.
Yeah, that's
I'll do
true.
things on my phone, on my couch at home, knowing full well my computer is about 12 feet away. But rather than get up and go use the computer, I'll just sit there on the couch and work it out on my phone because it's
Yeah,
there.
exactly. All right. So I wanted you to talk just for a minute about some of the types of applications that you're working on now and how they epitomize some of these trends.
Hmm. It's interesting. As I said earlier in the introduction, one of the things I like about this business is I get to do a lot of different things for a lot of different kinds of businesses. So we're sort of all over the map. I mentioned the banking customer before. We have an insurance broker that finally accepted the importance of a digital relationship with their customers, because I guess they felt that their business was always traditionally just picking up the phone and sending faxes. And there's a commercial real estate insurance broker. And we built a whole cloud platform for them where their customers or prospective customers can now submit their applications online. It automatically gets routed to to individual carriers and turned into proposals. And the broker, who was very proud of the fact that she just worked the phones all the time, is amazed now at the increase in volume of clients that she can handle now, because she realized it was all about rekeying proposals and recommunicating things back and forth between carriers, and it was consuming enormous amounts of time. And rather than her customers saying, gee, I never get to talk to you anymore, they love it. They can take care of themselves, and they still talk to her when they talk about new things, and they're asking questions that they actually need to consult her for that require human judgment, but they don't need to be bothering her with, hey, where's my application for this such and such. So that's the insurance space. We're involved in health and wellness. We're working with a fitness chain that sort of paid lip service to a digital relationship. It's a small fitness chain where they work with a third-party white labeled app, which is something a lot of businesses have an opportunity to do. You can go out and you can license something, and they'll put your logo on it, and they'll give you sort of a slightly tailored experience. But it's not the same as working directly with the customers. They finally grew to the point where they realized there was some value in having their own mobile experience and in tying it into their internal systems, so they can have a much closer relationship with their members now, because they own both ends of the conversation. They own the internal systems that handle the membership. They own the mobile application that speaks to their customers, and they can have a relationship with their members that works outside of the gym as well as in the gym. So when they're home, they can do exercises and record what they've done there. And when they go to the gym, they can capture additional information. So now they're always part of the family of this gym, and no longer just only when they're in the building. In the transportation space, we've got a couple of different customers working with an emergency services vehicle equipment provider. And they do all sorts of work with very important vehicles. And we're putting automation into the vehicles that help them to track the vehicles, help them to monitor vehicle telemetry and make sure that the maintenance is being done properly. And interestingly enough, making sure that they're not over maintaining the vehicles, because operators tend to go in terms of time, not usage. Know that this vehicle's been in the field for 6 months, so it needs an overhaul, but maybe now we can tell them it may have been out there for 6 months, but it hasn't been used that heavily. It's really only got 3.5 months worth of usage on it. You can wait another 3. So having that connection to the vehicle is a huge, it's a force multiplier for their business. They can be much more efficient and they can return more value to their customers. And we built a dashboard for them that they push to their customers so that customers can see what they've achieved. And look, you've saved this much on these vehicles, and the information's available to them right there. And so again, these are emergency services vehicles. These are 24/7 customers. And instead of having to call some call center on a Sunday night, they just relate to this company digitally on their phone or over the web, and they feel like they're being served by this company, even though it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday.
Yeah, that brings up a really good 2 points, actually. One is I know that you have a division that focuses on the Internet of Things.
Right.
Which
and that's yes. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that that's a big trend right now, where we're putting intelligence into inanimate objects and
Absolutely.
allowing them to talk to us and allowing us to control them from a distance, right?
Exactly. Well, and in the context of what we're talking about, really what that does is extends the digital relationship out into devices. I mentioned the ambulances. Well, that's one example. We have another customer that puts lubrication systems out in oil fields. And it's not important really what they're lubricating, but it's very important stuff. But they had the whole system for years of keeping track of the amount of fuel oil that's in these lubrication systems and doing truck rolls to get 50-gallon cans of oil out there and on time. And they'd get out there and they'd find out the existing can is only half full because this thing wasn't being used that much. Very inefficient. Now we've instrumented all of these lubrication systems so that they can report back not only their status, not only how well they're running or how much vibration they've experienced or how much fuel is left, but they can actually automatically request fuel when the time comes. So instead of having to monitor it, these devices basically just submit a maintenance ticket, just like a human would say, please fuel me up, and out goes the fuel. So that notion of extending your digital relationship doesn't only apply to your customers through their phones, but through the devices they interact with or the products that you sell. You put some smarts in them, you let those things talk to the internet, and you can get an enormous amount of data back.
So this is a paradox. When I look at it from the marketing side, one of our most successful clients is a woman who runs a company that arranges for luxury crude boat charters, yacht charters. And she's been extremely active in her work. So she writes a lot of the itinerary and special places you need to see and that kind of thing, because she's been there. She's been all around the world and can do that. And we have been helping her optimize her website so that she's found when somebody goes looking for that kind of service. And she's doing incredibly well, but partly also because she's willing to interact with customers. She's got chat on her site. And she answers it whenever they interact with her. And of course, her high-end customers expect that kind of service. So one of the things that we have to explain to baby boomers is they used to be able to set it and forget it back in the age of print and radio and TV and all that. And they can't do that anymore.
Right.
Customers are expecting a level of interaction that they've never expected before. They want their question answered, and people are really getting used to chat. They're accustomed to it. And I don't care how old you are now, if you're on the computer, you're starting to get used to the fact that there's somebody there able to answer your question. And it's a lot easier sometimes. You can go on about your work and do other things rather than waiting on hold for 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, I've been a convert myself recently. I used to not like the chat. I used to prefer to get on the phone and call and all. And it is much smoother if it's a well-done chat. And that's the key. It has to be well done. And interestingly, there's some experimentation with robotic chat systems, which aren't quite there yet. You can sort of tell
Yeah, I
when you're
agree.
dealing with
Yeah.
a robotic chat system, but the notion of always being able to reach out and get someone to help you, in some industries, it almost seems unfair. And I'm sure there's a lot of business owners out there, especially in our generation, who think, you know, how dare they expect this kind of service? I never gave this before. But because everybody else is doing it, it is an expectation, and you get sort of disappointed if you go to some business and there isn't a way to get my question answered now.
Yeah, and going back to something you said earlier about us getting them to the company and then the company being able to deliver what they've promised. I have this famous saying that I've said years ago, it keeps popping up, which is branding is the promise that you make, your brand is the promise that you keep. And these
Like that.
days, your brand is very much then, and the promise that you're keeping is reflected in your reviews. And there's another big trend going along with this. Customers are now talking to each other
Right.
in ways they never could before. There's discussion groups, there are forums, there are reviews, they're answering questions on Amazon about the product and the questions that the manufacturer should have answered, like how
Right.
big is it? It's kind of crazy, but the customers are bypassing the manufacturers and their packaged up information, and they don't trust it anymore because it's all the same marketing, blah, blah. So unless somebody gets really smart about it and understands what their customers really want.
Right.
So this ties back into a concept that I was hoping we'd talk about today, which is that, again, your app or your application, and I should say people typically refer to applications as desktop or cloud or web-based. They typically refer to apps as software you can run on your mobile device, just as a fine line. It's a gray area, but it's
It is. And from my seat now, more than ever, I look at it as your entire business is the application. And it's got several different doors into the room. There's the mobile door, there's the phone door, there's the tablet door, there's the website door, there's the in-store experience. If you have that kind of a facility where people come into your shop, they expect to have kiosks around where they can self-serve. And there's all these other doors into the room that is your business, which is your app. But yes, when people say app, they think phones. And when they think websites, they think websites, which is a whole nother issue of people's perception of what this all is now. What's a website versus what's a web-based business?
And I think that we have something in common, you with apps or applications and me on the marketing side, is that it's all gotten very specialized and complex. So for example, you talking about all these different doors, that means that when the application is being developed, you have to test for every single one of those environments to make sure that the user is not going to see some weird screwed up sort of display on their phone, on their particular old iPhone, for example. So it's really gotten to be complicated. And on the marketing side, what's happened is we have all these channels. We have social and search engine optimization and search engine marketing and marketing on other things. It's just all these different channels, and they change constantly. So what I've done with my own company is I have a core infrastructure team and then a bunch of specialists who live, eat, sleep, and breathe their particular area because they have to. I mean, Google changes its algorithm like 4 times a day or something.
Right.
You just can't be a generalist anymore and keep up with all of this. It's humanly impossible.
We both suffer from a perception issue with that, especially from people who've lived through the earlier days of business and marketing and all, where they may say, what are you talking about, Liz? Why is this so hard? You're marketing. You write an ad, right? That's all you do. You just write an ad and you're done. And they'll come to me and say, my son's in high school. He writes apps. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
The old God is in the details thing is huge in both of our businesses, where, yeah, you want to, particularly if you have a consumer-oriented mobile app, where you have absolutely no control over what devices people are going to use. You're going to have customers all around the world trying to interact with your business in every god-awful device available to humans, and we've got to test for all that, design for all that. And as you said, in your domain, you've got so many different channels for all this different information with different ways of relating to that information, different expectations from it. There's no simple little fix. You don't just take an ad out in the yellow pages anymore and you're done.
Yeah, and I know that you often talk about it takes more than a programmer, and I'm going to ask you to talk about that for a second. In my case, it takes more than a single specialist. So a lot of clients who come to us have tried one specialist at a time and said, oh, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. That didn't work. Okay. And they've spent thousands of dollars on something that didn't work, not realizing that all of this has to work together. And you actually have to have a team of people who see your account from the overall perspective and understand what you're trying to do from your business perspective,
Right.
which I know you also focus on in terms of your applications and the
Sure.
business goal. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's fascinating how there's a parallel between our two experiences in that regard. And it does relate in some ways back to the history of how we both got here. And yes, in the past, there have been stovepipes of activity. It was true 20 years ago. If you had a business and you just had a general notion that you could use computers to make your business better, that you could go out and hire a guy, and that guy or woman or whoever, half the time it was some kid in college, would write you an app in Visual Fox Pro or Access or something like that. And you laugh, but I see this all the time. And they build you an app, and that app would be cool because you've never had anything like it before, and it was only you and your team using it inside, so nobody cared really how it worked. It was hard, it was complicated, crashed a lot, but it got the job done. And then your business grew around that, and you had somebody come in and add some features, and you kind of slowly grew it around the work of some programmer or a couple of programmers. And all of a sudden, you've got a $10 million business running on this thing, and it's just not cutting it anymore. And you say, well, I need to update. I need to be on the web now or something like that. And you go out looking for just another guy. And it's not like that anymore, because if you're joining the current market and you're putting yourself out on the internet as a digital company, the relationship between you and your customers is way different than the relationship between you and your in-house tech. You put up with an awful lot in that Fox Pro app that no customer in the world would ever tolerate on the internet. There's an enormous expectation for what a web-based experience would be, what a mobile-based experience would be. And to get there, you need user experience designers who understand all this stuff. You need artists and visual designers who can create nice looking, compelling relationships on these devices. You need front-end programmers who know how to turn those designs into performant, compelling experiences. You need back-end. I'm using some terminology here that's specific to business, but you need engineers who know how to build systems behind the scenes, which today are almost always up in the cloud somewhere, which you've probably heard about. There's a certain set of skills you need to create these applications so that they are robust, reliable, secure. That's a huge thing now. So it takes a team to build even the simplest of digital experiences for a business. You don't just go out and get a person. And just like in your world, we'll say, well, I know a guy who can write some ad copy. He'll just do ads. And it's not even remotely like that anymore. And this notion that, well, there's marketing and there's communications and then there's advertising, all these things are different. Probably never was as true as people like to think, but it's nowhere near true now for you guys.
Yeah, it's gotten very complicated. And part of the complication has come from the fact that if you don't know about something and you hire someone who does know about it, they make money because of your ignorance. And there's a long history of digital specialists who want the client to stay stupid about this stuff and not really understand it, so that the specialist can make decisions that are more beneficial to the specialist than to the client or to the client's business or whatever the client's trying to do. So, I feel sorry for baby boomer business owners who have hired someone, never really understood what that person was doing, spent thousands of dollars and ended up with nothing. One of the things that we work on really hard in our business is to educate the client as we go. So we describe what's happening, and like a lot of people don't understand what the cloud is. The cloud is simply a bunch of high-powered computers sitting in a data center somewhere in a rack. And there's more data centers than ever now because the cloud is getting bigger. But those computers are powerful and set up to interact with other computers over the internet platform, basically. That's all it is. And your website is hosted, it's sitting somewhere in one of those servers that some business owns, and they're charging you for the space, basically.
Yeah, it's infrastructure that you rent instead of own.
Right, right.
And for some infrastructure,
I've
that's a
written
really good thing.
one of my blog articles is Website 101, where I explain the difference between your host for your domain, your host for your website. There's a number, and host for your email, depending on what system you're on. So there's a number of different places where your information is being stored and processed. And if you don't understand it, you kind of get in a mess. If your site goes down, you know, who do I call? What do I do? And how do I get it back up quickly? And who's monitoring it? Sites do go down, whether we, you know, the data definitely isn't set it and forget it. You can update a little plugin on a website and ruin your site. I mean, it's the simplest little things.
It's interesting. I've often been amazed at business owners I've met who are proud of the fact, and regardless of what business they're in, they're proud of the fact that they know their building's air conditioning system inside now. They know everything there is about their HVAC systems because they're on top of their vendors and all. And then when you ask them about their digital infrastructure, they have no clue. They say, well, we got this guy and he just does this stuff for us. I really know that's all black magic to me. That may have been understandable 10 or 15 years ago. It's inexcusable now, I think, for a business owner to not understand his or her digital infrastructure. You don't have to know how to build it and run it. That's what people are for. But you have to understand it just as well as you understand how well your building works. So
Which
those
is why
basic concepts.
Yeah, but it's hard to find the information too. I mean, that's why we educate people, because if you decide that you want to learn about search engine optimization or building an app or something, the data out there is not designed for you.
No.
You're coming into the middle of a 10 or 12-year-old movie.
But you don't have to learn how to do it. You just have to understand how it relates to your business.
Understood.
It's like you have to understand how tax law relates to your business. You don't have to be a tax attorney.
No.
You sort of have to understand how it relates. There's a level of understanding that any responsible business owner has to accept is necessary in order to make the kind of decisions that have to be made. And in the past, people took advantage of the fact that many business owners didn't want that, or just.
Yeah, and I just find that criminal, personally.
I agree.
I want to fix that problem. That's one of my goals before I leave the earth, is to try to help people understand this on a basic level, you know, just so they can run their business on it responsibly and make decisions, even hiring decisions, and which app you want to, which platform you want to go on. It's tough. And it's even tough. We had a client who has many variables on their product. They only have a few products, but they come in so many different sizes and all that, that they have more than 200 variables. And we started building their site on Shopify, which is a very popular e-commerce site, has a lot of good things going for it. And we were partway in and realized that they had a limit of 200 variables. And so we had to stop and go back. I helped fund that one because I felt bad about that, but we ended up with WordPress and WooCommerce, which is also a very popular and good, strong thing. But that's the kind of thing that you just constantly have to be doing your research. It's one of the reasons that I have a core infrastructure team on my staff who does nothing but go out and look at apps and see how we could be improving. Again, set it and forget it is a complete myth. It's a money loser.
Right. And that's also the benefit of dealing with a professional team who's been doing this for a while and understands all that, and, you know, not some kid out of school who says, oh yeah, I set up my mom's dress shop on Shopify. I can set up your distributorship for auto parts on Shopify as well, because it's the same thing, and it isn't always. And you have
Yeah,
to.
but even if you have experience, the programmer that we were working with on this had set up, and I've done Shopify sites too, but it was one of those gotchas. There's these little tiny gotchas. It's kind of like dealing with the government, like you were talking about with the tax forms. And there's this one little clause in the bottom that says, no, 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 if you do that,
Right,
you're part of the exception or whatever. So you really need somebody looking out for your business
right.
to help you get past these gotchas. And nobody's perfect on this. All of us. I tell everybody, nobody's an expert on this.
Yeah, it's a little harder in our digital world, and I count you as part of the digital world now because so much of what you do is communicated digitally, that it's a little harder even for seasoned professionals to know up front whether or not a chosen course of action is going to end well. And there has to be an acceptance in the industry in general that change is a natural part of everything we do. And you may go pretty far down the road with Shopify and crash into something like that that was either not well known or perhaps even hidden from you by Shopify. You have to retreat and change directions and go in a different way. Chances are you were able to take advantage of 2/3 of all the work you did and just point someplace else at Woo Shopping or whatever it was you used.
WooCommerce, yeah.
WooCommerce. It's not like it's a total throw everything away and start over, but the people who hire us have to sort of accept that it's like that. It's a little less cut and dried than installing a new HVAC system. Although we've all had contractors come to us and say, hey, we opened up that wall to put in this window and found that everything's rotted out because you had a water leak 30 years ago. We're going to have to rebuild the whole wall. And we just shake our heads and say, woe is me, and we accept that. But when someone in our business says, turns out your product is too complicated for Shopify, and we don't really publish those limitations. We had to crash into them. Now we have to make a change. And someone will just yell at you and say, I thought you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, we worked it out. The client's happy, but it's, and we do everything we can in those situations to limit the damage all the way around and figure out what to do and take the next, as my husband's always saying, do the next right thing.
Right.
So we do that. But it does bring up a good point. And it doesn't happen that often. It's just that when it does, it really sticks in your mind, because then you want to say to yourself, okay, we've now learned that lesson.
Right.
And as you learn those lessons, you can continue to apply them and make sure that whoever comes along next doesn't have that problem. So it is a constant learning experience and an experimental experience. So the other thing that happens is you don't know until you put it out there how the audience is going to respond.
Right.
And you can guess, you can assume based on previous experience, and you can do what we always do, which is interview real customers and find out what they care about, how they buy. We try to reverse engineer the successful sale and all that. But then you get down to the details about the specific words that you're using and, experimenting, A/B testing and all that stuff that you have to do now, because we are dealing with an interactive environment.
Right.
So part of the set it and forget it mentality was that you could just do what you did as a company. And if they didn't like it, okay, you'll get some other customers. But now the guy who didn't like it goes out and tells 100 other people
Yeah.
on his Facebook page that this is a real ripoff and he'll never do business with them again and that kind of thing. So
it's a very public relationship with your customer.
yeah, it's a whole different world. And you simply cannot ignore your customers and their real wishes anymore.
Right.
I'm sure you run into that in your business where they start using an app and they start learning that people want it this way instead of that way,
Absolutely.
or the buttons aren't big enough or whatever.
Absolutely. It's something that we as an industry finally internalized about 10 years ago. It's a lesson we've learned over and over again, and for many, many years just refused to admit it, which is that with many, many types of software, people will know what they want when they see it. And you have to keep doing it over and over again until you get it right. And you have to test and change and test and change. And some of your listeners may have heard the term agile development because people love throwing this thing around as some new religion. And there's really nothing special about it other than just an admission that you can't know with these types of systems that you're doing the right thing until you've tested it with real people. And you have to be very open to making quick changes to what you've been doing to adapt to what you learn from those real people. And there's a whole science around how to roll these things out, how to test them. You don't do a focus group of 3 people, say this is great, then commit to a $2 million app development and launch it to 50 million users. You do it a few at a time and you grow it. And the reason people have refused to accept this truth for so many years is because in many businesses, and mine is one of them, people want to know, all this sounds great, how much will it cost and when will it be done? And the software industry has struggled for generations to answer that question and has consistently failed to answer that question because you can't predict it, not when it's touching humans. You can sometimes predict it if you're, launching a rocket to Mars, and that's why these things take 10 years. There's certain types of engineering that you have to be able to predict these things. You have to get it right the first time. When you build a bridge, you don't get a chance to try it out, see if it falls down, and then do it over. So it's a very rigorous process, and all these things take many, many years and countless millions of dollars to do those things. If you're building an app on a phone that relates to your customers, you're not going to get it right the first time. You'll get close, and then you'll learn and you'll change it. And this gets back to an area where our 2 sides overlap, because one of the things we now do quite heavily with these things for 2 purposes is instrument these apps to see what people do with it, to learn from it. And this is true of apps on a phone or on a tablet or websites. Maybe this is a dark secret of the industry. I don't think it's a secret anymore that these things are tracking you. They're watching what you do. They're keeping track of where you go and how did you get to this page and what did you do after you click this button. And we track all of that to understand how to make the whole relationship better. And sort of as a secondary benefit, that information may tell you how to make your business better and how to make your relationship with your customer better. And it's the kind of dynamic feedback from your marketing activities that you couldn't get in the good old days when you just ran an ad. Maybe you called up Nielsen and said, how many people watched my commercials? But that's about as far as you could go. Now you can find out in real time that this post that you put out to some forum somewhere generated 700,000 clicks back to your website. I made that up. Wouldn't that be nice? But you have that information available to you in real time because of all this tracking that's going on.
Yeah, that's a good point. We are finding now that there's a couple of big trends that I wanted to just talk about for a second. One is that when people are looking for a service business, they tend not to use Google. They tend to go to their friends. So we're doing a lot more listening now out there in the world where customers are talking to each other and trying to, in addition to, you still have to do Google, you still have to get your rankings. There's kind of a baseline that you have to do with your site and have good content. And part of the reason for that is once they've decided that, or somebody's recommended you, then the first thing they do is come to your website and they see who you are. They may even check your Twitter feed, believe it or not, and see what you talk about, what you care about. They're judging your character before
I would start with LinkedIn. I'm actually amazed now, and sorry for interrupting you, but now when I first contact someone or establish a relationship with someone, first place I go is a LinkedIn page. And now I'm shocked if it's not up to date, not good.
No picture.
Yep.
You got to have your picture on there at least.
It's kind of table stakes now that you have to have a decent LinkedIn presence because that's how people will get to know you.
Yeah. The table stakes thing is a big deal. There's a baseline amount of stuff that you have to do so that the customer knows who you are before they ever talk to you or talk to your salesperson or anything like that. And the other big trend is just the customers talking to each other. You have to listen to them. So it's just, everything's changing. And we're trying to make sure that we keep up with it depending on the type of business that we're working with, because it's a different world for B2C, business to consumer, than it is for B2B. It's also business to business. It's also a different world for small and large businesses, what they expect from you. and the industry that you're in. It just, you really have to be careful to do what is appropriate for your business, and to partner with a company that understands this is about growing your business, not just going after the latest eye candy or marketing fad or programming fad, or the latest program, that the latest the methodology like agile and all of those things that people sort of throw around, but it may or may not be appropriate for you.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We've gone through waves, and this has probably been true since the first wheel was carved out of stone. As new things come along, there's a period of time when people use it because they just think they have to use it. So there was this flood of websites around the turn of this century where everybody had to have a website, and all these services businesses popped up that would build you a website. And some of them, they were billion-dollar unicorns back then too, that flamed out big time because just throwing up a website doesn't really do anything for your business if you don't put any thought into what that really means. And then that petered out. And then there's, to some extent, I think some people are probably feeling that about this cloud stuff that they keep hearing about. Oh, I guess we're supposed to be in the cloud. That's just another fancy thing, but that's a little different. It's not a fad. It's a real thing that you can actually get real value out of if you think about how your relationship to technology is. But people are kind of accustomed to it. I'm sure social media is some of that. Yeah, I gotta have a Twitter feed. My kid does my Twitter stuff for me, or you sort of pay lip service to these things. That's almost counterproductive, because then when you do go to look someone up on LinkedIn or check out their Twitter feed, and you see that maybe they had 3 posts from 4 years ago and then fell silent, you kind of lose a little respect for them as a potential business partner.
Yeah, it's even little things like the copyright date on the bottom of your website. I go there because I want to see if people are asleep at the switch or not.
Right.
It's a little checkbox kind of thing. And if you don't pass those basics, even having your site needs to be secure. If your site doesn't say HTTPS at the top,
right,
Google is basically ignoring you.
Yeah,
so everything else
realize that.
Yeah. So these are big lessons that you have to learn. And then once you learn them, you put them into practice, and you just keep growing and get your business up. Well, it's been great. Any last thoughts on all of this, Frank?
Sort of a closing thought, and I can imagine a number of people watching this, because I have similar conversations with them. In that generation, there's people who are thinking that I'm so close to retiring. Can't I just keep this plane in the air for another couple of years doing what I'm doing? And the answer is a resounding maybe. You can't tell, but it's got to feel a little frustrating to say, why do I have to adopt all this change now? Everything's been going so well all these years, but the stuff is changing. Your customers' expectations are changing. And there's always someone out there nipping at your heels who can do it the right way. So I guess all I'll say is, if you choose to ignore all of this, just make sure you do that consciously and understand the risk that you're taking, because it may not work out.
Yeah. And going back to the harshness of our title, Go Digital or Die, it is very tempting. And I'm sure there's a lot of business owners that are just like, oh, geez, this is too much, which is why it helps to work with somebody who will work you through it, teach it to you. The thing I keep reminding people is that this is all learnable stuff. Nobody's born knowing how to program or how to do search engine optimization or any of that stuff. It's all stuff that we've had to learn. And I think you and I have had a bit of advantage because we chose early on to get into the tech business, and we've been able to build on that as we went. So there's never been a question in my mind since that embarrassing day when I was 17 and I made that decision and vowed to myself, there's never been a question. But the real truth is business is digital now.
Right.
There's just no way around it. I mean, unless you have a lemonade stand and, on the front on your lawn, everything else, customers have come to expect it.
Exactly. And successfully making that transformation involves something that's not all that new, and it's something that pretty much any successful business owner has done many times, and that's just choosing your service providers carefully and then listening to them and managing them well. It's no different than whether you built your building or carpeted your floors or hired whatever other teams to do even the way you hire your accountant. People put so much more thought into how they hire their accounting firm than how they hire their software development resources or their marketing team. You just have to hire good service providers, listen to them, and manage them carefully.
I agree. It's all about leadership.
That's right.
Learning and leadership. All right, Frank. Well, it's just been wonderful chatting with you as always.
It has. Let's do this again.
Yeah, let's do this again.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.